Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
All is well, all is well. First and foremost, I want to thank you for coming on the platform. This is definitely an honor, and I truly appreciate you taking out the time to stop by.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's definitely an honor. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are, where you from, and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Jaimie Krems, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at UCLA. And I'm also the director of the UCLA Center for Friendship Research, which is the first center of its kind dedicated to understanding the science of friendship. I work at the University of California, Los Angeles, and I am talking to you from sunny, lovely LA right now.
Wow, okay, that's really, really cool. Now, what courses do you teach?
So, right now, I teach an undergraduate course in social psychology. I'm a social psychologist and I use evolutionary tools as well as tools from relationship science and behavioral ecology. And I am also about to teach a graduate course in research methods.
Okay, okay. And I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned the friendship research. What exactly does that involve and how does that work?
Yeah, so friendship is so important, right? A lot of people value their friends, and we've known that for a really long time. But it's only in the past decade or so that we as researchers have started to really understand how important friendships are for facilitating a range of really beneficial outcomes like economic mobility, health, happiness, thriving. Essentially, having friends can increase how long you live. So we're starting to realize how important friendships are. And at the same time, friendships are really understudied compared to our other social relationships. So if you look at romance and romantic relationships, there are tons of labs where you can go and study that. If you look at family relationships, there are tons of labs where you can go to study that. But if you want to understand how people find friends, how people make friends, how people keep friends, how people deal with the loss of friends, there are very few places to go to study that. And here at UCLA, I think we're the number one place in the world.
Wow, that's really amazing because friends are very important. That's a vital part of life. Like you said, it can increase your life expectancy. They can make you or break you.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Now I wanted to know this. When did you develop this passion for, psychology and, friendship? Is this something that you wanted to do since you were little, or did you kind of get into it later in life?
Yeah, so I was actually a classics major in undergrad. I thought I'd work at a museum. And I worked booking bands and music. I was a big old hipster. Um, and so I thought that stuff was interesting, but then I found books by Steven Pinker and Richard Dawkins on how the mind works. And that blew my mind. It changed the way that I thought I could ask questions about human nature and human behavior. So I went back to school and did sort of like a post back in biological basis of human behavior. Then I did a master's at Oxford at the Institute for Cognitive and Evolutionary Anthropology, working with Oliver Curry and the great Robin Dunbar, and finished my PhD working mostly on how women navigate their social relationships, so both friendships and competition, which is relatively overlooked. For a long time, people thought, oh, women don't compete, women don't aggress, but women know better. Lots of people know better. And from trying to understand women's social relationships, I started to look at friendship. And I had all of these questions about how human friendship works, how human friendship psychology works. Those questions were not answered in the literature. I mean, things as basic as, are your friends the same age as you? Do you want that? We have all of this work on age related mate preferences, nothing in friends. We're really at a loss in this literature. And so, because we know so little, we can't really give anybody good advice for making friends. And yet, people are in the midst of a wild loneliness epidemic in much of the West. So, Um, as soon as I really started to put this together, it became a driving motivation to understand how people do friendship.
Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. Um, Now I can ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about doing like a documentary or a book on this subject?
Oh man, one day I would love to write a book on friendship. I just won a career award from the National Science Foundation for my work on friendship, and as part of that, we'll be making sort of short YouTube videos about the friendship research coming out of the lab and the center more widely. But in terms of a book, that's a ways off because, first of all, I'm busy. Second of all, I really think we need more and better information before we can really write a good book on this topic. That doesn't mean that other books haven't been written on this topic that are great. There is a book by my old advisor, Robin Dunbar, on friendship that is lovely. There is a book by anthropologist Dan Harushka on friendship that's more of an academic volume that's lovely. And there are multiple books out there in the popular press that also exist. But I think to really do a great book in the future will require us to do a lot more of the research first. So we have the stuff that goes in the book.
Okay, okay. Um, Now let me see. Okay, now you had mentioned this a lonely epidemic. Can you speak to that? Is that something that's a result of like the post-pandemic or technology, or is it a combination of things? What exactly is going
Oof.
on where a lot of people are feeling lonely?
Yeah, so there are a few questions and embedded in that. And one is, so what is this loneliness epidemic? In the US, the Surgeon General has said that we are in the midst of an epidemic where people feel like their social needs are not being met. So even if they might have friends, they don't feel supported and part of something potentially. That's true in other nations. So in the UK, I believe there's a loneliness czar who is dealing with these feelings of loneliness and their negative impacts on health and longevity and well being. So, first, there's this huge epidemic. It does exist. And second is why? Why is there a loneliness epidemic and why is it existing right now? I don't think we actually have good answers to that second question yet. For my money, I think, yes, the pandemic absolutely exacerbated that. It got people out of the habit of seeing one another, of meeting in sort of uh, neutral or third spaces. So they're not going to exercise classes, they're not going to clubs. And then another reason has to do with decline in civic participation. People are, as has been said for a very long time, bowling alone. They're not joining bowling leagues. They're not joining Rotary clubs. They're not joining community organizations. I think that is another problem. Um, I would also add to that. So yes, technology is part of it, but only insofar as we let technology take up our time, right? So time is an inelastic resource. Time that I spend talking to you is not time that I can spend returning the million emails I don't even want to return. So I'm glad I'm talking to you instead. But the time that I'm spending here, I can't spend on friends either, and so on and so forth. So people are spending a lot of time looking at their friends online, perhaps, or looking at people that they might have parasocial relationships with online, so celebrities. Or maybe they're just looking at, rescue dogs and jewelry and goat yoga. But whatever they're doing with that time, they are not spending it in communion with other people anymore. And people are busier than ever as it is. So take that busyness, add the fact that particularly young folks are spending their limited free time scrolling Instagram rather than engaging with another human, and you have a recipe for a loneliness epidemic, in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I agree. I don't know if I told you, I'm currently in Africa. I'm in East Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed I've been in like 20 African countries, so the technology is a little bit behind. So children, they don't have iPads, they don't have cell phones. most of them don't have computers in their house or video games, so they outside, they playing soccer, they running, they jumping, they throwing rocks. But when I go
Mhm.
back home, I'm from Cleveland. When I go back home to see
Yeah.
my family, my nieces and nephews, they don't appear to
They're all
be
like this.
outdoors as much.
Yeah. I mean, I can see. So I'm from Philadelphia. I'll go back to Philly. In Los Angeles, you can't really, there aren't places to sort of see people in a park. If I see them in a coffee shop, they're all working or on their computers. If I see students on campus walking, they are usually on their phones too, if they're walking alone or even if they're not. And when I go back to Philly and I could see people in a park, there's actually a place where, yeah, some of the young people are on their phones, but a lot of people are just reading books. Um, and I do wonder, to what extent there are regional differences in this. So not only the availability of technology, like you're saying, but also just in sort of the culture of participation, of talking to one another, of technology use in public. Um, Scholars like Jonathan Haidt are trying to get phones out of schools to make kids pay attention to the work and engage with one another in their classes. And um, some of the data seem to suggest that, hey, maybe that actually makes people happier too. And if that's true, perhaps it's because it forces people to actually engage with one another rather than just, you know, liking pictures of Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, definitely. I think I seen something online where it was a school. I'm not for sure where it was, but it was a group of students, and they was like, I guess, rebelling against smartphones. So they went back
Mm.
to the old, where they could just make a call
Yeah.
or maybe like a short text message or something.
Yeah, I think there's like a Disney celebrity who's even made her own phone. So it's not a smartphone, it's just a flip phone. You use it to talk to people. You don't use it to, do the crossword and check your email and scroll Instagram.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now I don't know if you touched on this all right already. The Social Minds Lab.
Hmm. Yeah, so as part of my work here at UCLA, I'm the PI or principal investigator of the Social Minds Lab. Our lab explores the big overarching question of how our social minds help people maximize the benefits and minimize the costs of our social relationships. And we do this via three arms of work. Work looking specifically at women's social relationships with one another, so how women navigate the unique interactions they might have with other women, both cooperative and friendly, both cooperative and competitive. Stereotyping and stigma, which are at once products of our social minds as well as hurdles in our social landscapes, right? So when our minds encounter these things as targets, we have to overcome them or at least manage them. And then friendship. And so much of my work here and that of the folks in my lab focuses on how the mind does friendship. So, from our point of view, we sort of think about if we could describe the challenges that people have had to face to make friends, that people have had to face throughout human evolution, right? We have to find them, we have to make them, become close to them, we have to keep our friends. The better able we are to richly describe the shapes of those challenges, sort of like a lock fitting into a key, the better able we'll be to derive informed predictions about how we unlock those challenges, essentially, or the shape of the tools that we use to find, make, and keep friends.
Wow, okay, that's very interesting. I guess I could speak, on my childhood. We moved
Mhm.
around a lot. I would go to
Gotcha.
different schools, so I was always like the new guy. So that was my challenge, going to,
Mhm.
the unknown because we couldn't sit in the house all day. Like now you got the phone, you can watch movies, you could say the movie, you got Netflix, you got so many things that could keep you preoccupied. It's like, you
Mhm.
just don't jump out. So I could relate to that. Now I wanted to ask you this. You spoke about like I guess women friendships, say versus
Mhm.
like male friendships. What have you
Mhm.
found from your research? Any differences, a lot or similarities?
Yeah, so I mean, the similarities are the greatest proportion, right? So often we overlook the similarities, but in general, people want friends who are nice to them, right? We want friends who are kind, who are intelligent, who are trustworthy. And these things exist across sex slash gender. But if we're looking for the sex differences, what we tend to see is that first, across cultures, across nations, um, people from a very young age seem to prefer being friends with same sex others. So girls hang out with girls and boys hang out with boys. Um, we also see some differences in terms of sort of the size of the groups. So girls and women tend to form these one-on-one, really close, best friendships. And they invest a lot in those. They talk a lot about what they think about other people, what they think about one another, what they think about themselves. They're marked by deep emotional intensity and self-disclosure. Whereas men's friendships seem to be much looser than that. They're not as intimate. Men's friendships with one another, I should say, are not as intimate. And men tend to have more friends, so they form these looser multi male friendship groups. And an interesting thing about those groups is that, well, they're not engaged in a lot of talking, but they're engaged in talking for talking's sake, I should say, but they're engaged in a lot of activities. So people have called men's friendships shoulder to shoulder friendships, comparing them to women's face to face friendships, because women's dyadic friendships are marked by a lot of talking back and forth. Um, Another cool difference is that men's friendships seem more robust than women's. So men's friendships are less likely to end. So they're probably they seem to be longer lasting, and they seem to be better able to tolerate conflict than women's friendships. At least there are some hints in the data from folks like Joyce Benenson at Harvard who are doing incredible work exploring this.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Because as you speaking, I'm processing the information, but I'm just trying to reflect on my own experiences. So I could see some of that because it seemed like at least when we maybe high school or middle school, you'll see the guys, they'll kind of be in the group. It might be three, four,
Yeah.
or five of them over there. They do this, and they play football or they hang because they rappers or whatever. But the females or the women,
Mm.
it be her and her friend. It may be two of them, maybe three of them. Sometimes you didn't really see like a group of five or six girls that hang together and kind of
Yeah.
lobby and talk.
Yeah. So where are you right now again? I'm sorry.
I'm currently in Madagascar.
Oh wow, that's awesome. The lemur capital of the world.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in Madagascar, is that what you see as well? If you went out into the world and just sort of watched people like in a community area, would you see men traveling in larger groups than women, do you think?
I don't know. And here, honestly, I haven't really paid attention to it, but here it's kind of like a mixture. Where I would go to other parts of Africa, and it's like the men is over here, and the women ain't even outside, or they don't
Mm.
even. In certain areas, you don't even see women at all. They like it's more definitive, it's more cut and
Yeah.
dry. But here, it's like everybody kind of mingle. You know what I'm saying? You might see one or two girls, but like I say, ultimately you may see three or four guys. They going to play soccer, or they going to wherever. So.
And do you see the guys are hanging out with the guys and the girls are hanging out with the girls, or is there a mix there too?
Like I said, I think it's mostly is in that term. It's mostly the guys with the guys. Like the basketball court is over here. It's nothing
Mhm.
but guys watching, playing, participating.
Yeah.
And then or they playing soccer, and then the females are separate. If you see a guy and a girl together, it's probably like a relationship, or
Mhm.
they related or something like that.
All right, so you have to find me the next Joel Embiid, because I'm from Philadelphia and our Joel is not doing so hot. So yeah, let me know. Let me know if you find me one.
I got you. I got you. Let me see. What was the next question? Oh, okay, I wanted to let me see. I could ask you about some of the journals. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Anything you want.
Let me see. We're about 20 minutes in. So I think maybe your latest one. Sometimes we want vicious friends? If you could speak about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
of course. So, for a really long time, we have asked people what they want in friends, right? So, what are your friend preferences? Um, and if I asked you this question, your intuition would be really close to what the research has found. So if I asked, would you rather be friends with a woman who always donates her change to charity at the end of the year, or a woman who says really mean things that make people cry? You'd probably say, hey, I want to be friends with the nice woman and not the vicious woman. And if I said, would you rather befriend a guy who always keeps people's secrets, he's really trustworthy, versus a guy who is, goes crazy and beats other people up sometimes, you'd probably say, I'd rather be friends with the trustworthy guy than the vicious guy. And that's true across the literature. But what my team thought was missing here is sort of a target specificity, which is simply to say that people have preferences for how we want our friends to treat us. And those preferences are different from how we want our friends to treat strangers and how we might want our friends to treat our enemies. So, as soon as we acknowledge the fact, and this is a big component of my lab's work, as soon as we acknowledge the fact that our friends interact with people that aren't just us, our friends have their own relationships with other people, their own interactions with other people, then we start to have to realize, oh, wait, we have to take those interactions into account too. Because if my friend, for example, was really trustworthy and kept my enemy's secret about planning to poison me, well, my friend's really trustworthy, right? And we want trustworthy friends, except I'm going to be dead soon. So, how we want our friends to behave depends on toward whom they're behaving. And I want my friend to be nice to me and not mean to me. And so that's what past work has found. But what we'll say is, okay, yes, that makes sense if you only ever imagine your friend interacting with you, right? But if my friend is interacting with other people, then I'd want him to behave less nice toward strangers than to me, and less nice toward my enemy than my best friend is to me. And that's exactly what we find. So, just to sort of summarize the results of this work, we looked at the US, we looked at India, and we tend to find that first, people want friends who are really nice and they'd rather their friends not be vicious. Sure. But that really applies to how people say they want their friends to behave toward them. If you ask people more deeply, all right, so how do you want your friend to behave towards strangers? People want friends who are nicer to us than our friends are to strangers. And finally, if you ask people, how do you want your best friend to behave toward your own enemy? People want their best friends to be more vicious than those friends are kind. So they want best friends who are vicious more than kind when the behavior is directed toward our enemies. So I might want, say we're best friends. I hate uh, Trae Young because he looks like a sick pigeon and I hate him anyway. And I'm a Philadelphian, and so I hate everyone that's not on our team. So I hate Trae Young. I would want you to be more vicious to Trae Young than you are nice to Trae Young. And that goes against what people have said for years we want in friends. But again, it's just because people have only looked at how we want our friends to behave toward us, and they've ignored the fact that this dyadic friendship between you and me exists in a world where you might interact with Trae Young and you might interact with a range of other people.
Yeah, that's deep. I mean, it's like it's chess. I mean, you gotta, like you say, look at both sides, because sometimes I don't know if it's exactly in alignment, but you might have a friend that do things to other people that you wouldn't like if they did it to you, but you say, "Well,
Yeah.
they never stole nothing from me, they steal from other people." You know what I'm saying? So it's like your
Yeah.
time is gonna come. you know.
Yeah. So my graduate student Laurie and Murray, with our another student Nina Rodriguez and our collaborator Daniel Sneezer, we have this paper that is currently the revision is back under review about what makes somebody trustworthy, and almost exactly like you say, the mind is sort of aggregating information from how you generally behave along with information that is about how you behave toward me. So if you never betray anybody, you're going to be, including me, so you don't betray me, I'm going to think you're really trustworthy. But if you do betray, like, so say you betray a secret, for example, it matters the direction of the betrayal or how that betrayal affects me. So if you share my secret, I'm going to think you're really untrustworthy. But if you share somebody else's secret with me, I'm going to think you're actually a little bit more trustworthy. Kind of like if you cheat on me, I'm going to think you're really untrustworthy. But if you cheat on your spouse with me, I'm going to think you're a little bit more trustworthy. So not all betrayers are equally untrustworthy.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're 25 minutes in. I can ask you about another journal. Let me see. It says, okay, one tool for maintaining friendships in the face of third party threats.
Yeah, so that work is on friendship jealousy. And when I started this work, the sort of consensus was, all right, if you feel jealousy when one of your friends makes another friend, there's something wrong with you. You don't have a correct conceptualization of how friendship works. You're immature, you're needy and have low self esteem. But what my colleagues and I thought is, well, no, friendship jealousy exists across historical eras, it exists across human cultures, and behavior consistent with feelings of friendship jealousy exists even in non human animals. So, female mustangs, for example, form really close bonds with one another. And if a third female mustang came in and tried to like take my best friend, I would bite her and kick her. And we see this in female mustangs, we see this in dolphins, we see this in non-human primates, and we see this in people too. It's just among adults we've gotten better at hiding the behavior or doing more efficacious behavior that isn't just saying stop being friends with them or I won't be your friend anymore. So what we thought is, all right, if it exists across cultures, eras, and even species, then it's probably adaptive. So even though it doesn't feel good to feel jealous when our friends make new friends, it might, on average, benefit us. Benefit us in particular by sort of being a signal to us that, oh, hey, we need to hang on to our best friend who we really value. And so, what we did, inspired by the sort of adaptationist program of research or evolutionary work, we said if jealousy is a system in the mind that is designed to help people keep their friends, then it should have certain features. So, for one, jealousy should be calibrated to how close the friend in question is to us. So, we should feel more jealousy when our best friend forms a new close friendship than when a close friend does, and more jealousy when a close friend forms a new friendship than when an acquaintance does. And we found that. Second, we said friendship jealousy should be calibrated to the likelihood that this new person our friend is hanging out with is going to replace us in our friends' affections. So our friends might spend a ton of time with other people, like, they go to work and they spend 40 hours a week with Greg. But as long as they value us more than Greg, I'm not going to feel jealousy there. So we tested whether time, as opposed to replacement threat, calibrated jealousy. It's not about time. It's really about how much do you, this new person, stand to take my place in the friendship. That's what drives friendship jealousy. And next we asked, all right, if friendship jealousy functions to protect our valued friendships, then when we feel it, we should behave in ways that actually help us achieve those goals. So, for one experiment, we created a 44 item scale about friend guarding. How do you guard your friendship, essentially? And it included items about vigilance. So, maybe you're on social media trying to figure out if your friend is hanging out with this other person. And what we find is that feelings of friendship jealousy predict how much people say that they will, or that even in past existing relationships, they have done this sort of friend guarding behavior. Um, and that holds even though, friendship jealousy is thought to feel like anger or like sadness. Sadness and anger don't predict how much people guard their friends. Friendship jealousy predicts how much people guard their friends. And so we've explored that. And then in a follow up paper, we looked at sex similarities and sex differences in that. So everything I just told you, that holds across sex. So the more we value our friends, the more jealous we are when those friendships are threatened. The more that this interloper, this third party, stands to take our place, the more that we report feeling friendship jealousy and reaction. But for women, they tend to feel stronger friendship jealousy when their best friendships and close friendships are threatened than men do. And for men, and I don't know if this is a real thing or just an artifact in the statistics of this work, they tend to feel more jealousy than women do when their acquaintanceships are threatened. So, sort of their loose friendship group. We'd have to see if that replicates. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, that's definitely interesting and thought provoking. So I want to thank you so much again for coming on the platform.
Yeah, of
This is
course.
definitely an honor. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I definitely look forward to the work that you have coming in the future for sure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I hope you have a great day and that you get to see some lemurs. That's the coolest.
Right,
Learn how to
right.
identify.
Likewise.